Hi there, this is Michael Becker, and welcome to our session on IoT ethics in the age-aware internet and the protection of vulnerable populations. This is such an important conversation for us to be having today, especially in the world driven by data and privacy and security, and the fact that we're all becoming just connected individuals within this digital world. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. So with me today is going to be Lucy Knight and Denise Tayloe. Lucy is with the Data Places. Hey, Lucy, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And we have Denise Tayloe from PRIVO. And we're going to have this conversation about what does it mean to be living and working with and delivering services within the age-aware internet. So within that in mind, let's just take a step back. And Lucy and Denise, can you introduce yourselves and let us know how you ended up here today? So let's start with Denise.
Okay, well, good morning. Thanks, Michael, for having me. Lucy, good to see you again. I'm Denise Tayloe. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Privacy Vaults Online. We're known as PRIVO in the marketplace, and we're squarely in the minors' identity protection space.
Okay, now let's just get a little bit more background. You've been at this a long time, and can you give us set the stage for us a little bit? I mean, how you got into helping industry manage the people within the age-aware internet really started from you being on the business side of things. You were financing and in finance and accounting, and you realized.
No, I'm a recovering CPA.
Yeah, and you're like, Houston, we got a problem, and that's how you ended up starting PRIVO. So maybe you can give us a little bit of that background.
Thank you, Michael, for letting me go so far back. I remember in late '99, my brother knocked on my door and said, "Hey, there's this thing called the internet." And I said, "I know, I heard about it already. I have an email." And he said, "No, it's going to be such a thing, and we're going to need data. It's going to be so important." And he wanted to create a company called Info Nuts, where everybody's nutty about information, and it was directed at children so that they could collaborate and interact. And businesses seeded the environment, turned their nutty ideas into inventions into real products. And then they earned nut bucks and spent it in the community. So this is like really early days, and we tripped over the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So COPPA came along and said, before you can collect, use, or disclose any personally identifiable information that you might collect from a child, or before you allow them to share their own information, you need to get verifiable parental consent. So as the accountant in me was like, oh my goodness, who's going to pay for this? How do I do this? How do I verify? How do I get verifiable parental consent? Remember, this is the early days when the dog was in front of the computer screen and everyone said nobody knows who's on the other side. So that is how I got into this business. The .com bubble burst, and I saw an opportunity to actually deliver Privacy Vaults Online. A way to sort of bank your info.
And we'll get to near the end of the conversation exactly what that is and how people can action against that. So thanks for that history in the background. One real point that I want to emphasize, though, so for those that we're having an international audience here, and so COPPA is the U.S.'s child protection law. And in the U.S., just so we're very clear, things have evolved from that over the last couple of decades, from that one child protection law to today. My understanding is we have about 144 or more child-related protection and internet-related protection laws in the United States. And we'll come to those details in a minute. Let's let Lucy chime in. So Lucy, you, as you say, I do data as the way you introduced yourself to me the other day. So tell us, what does that mean?
Okay, so my background is actually public sector. I was a person who was just helping wrangle the data that this is universal. This is not just the UK. We need data to run those public services to make sure that we're running them right, that the right people are able to access what they're entitled to access, and that nothing goes wrong. So I've got some 20 odd years of working in both local government and central government in the civil service. To what Denise just said, who's going to pay for this, the eternal question, and how many innovators begin from identifying a problem that's on their doorstep, that's in their wheelhouse, and they look around and they say, well, why isn't anybody fixing it? Oh, maybe it's my job. Maybe because I'm the person who can see it, because I'm the person who knows how it ought to happen, maybe I can fix that. that was a moment that I had as well, and a colleague of mine from the council too. We decided that we were going to help people do better with data. So that's what the database does. I'm actually a data scientist, and Michael, you've been very kindly describing me as a data ethicist, which is charming and sounds far more important and serious and quite academic. I'm not really academic. I'm a practitioner, and the ethics part of it for me is big picture, step back. Are we building the right thing? Are we building it right? Are we doing it in a way that's not just technically competent and functional, not just legally compliant, but also avoiding those potential harmful impacts and unintended consequences? So this is going to be a fascinating discussion for me, because Denise and I, we've had a lovely chat already, and I know we think very much along the same lines. When it comes down to it is, how do we do this and not hurt anybody in the process? How do we get it right?
Yeah, so with that in mind, let's try to, I mean, in our preamble for this conversation too, we quickly realized that we could have an 8-hour, 10-hour days worth of conversation on this topic alone, but we only have 38 minutes left. So I kind of want to organize our structure, our conversation into 4 units, if you will. First, what's happening in the market? Why does this matter? What do we need to do about it? And then what are your takeaways? And so let's spend a few minutes in each one of those sections. So first and foremost, let's globally throw an umbrella over the world here and tell us what is happening. Now, in preparing for this conversation, Sean Aleph over at the PRIVO gave me some really nice stats. There are 2.2 billion people under the age of 18 on the planet. So when we talk about children and minors, that's what we're referring to, is that protected class of people under the age of 18. But if you look at the title of our conversation as well, today it's about vulnerable populations. So we often look at this idea of a child, someone that may not necessarily have the maturity or the experience to be able to make an informed decision when they act. But there's also, vulnerable adults, which is really defined as the functional, physical, or mentally challenged individuals who need help. And those people that are then having other adults, have control over their lives. And so therefore they are vulnerable. And there are hundreds of millions of those people on the planet. So with that in mind, can each of you kind of talk to me a little bit about what's happening? Why do we care about people under the age of 18 or these vulnerable adults, in the sense of needing to do something unique and special to protect them, if you will? Let's start with Denise. Go for it.
Well, one thing I would say is that the elephant in the room, children can't sign contracts, and people that don't have cognitive wherewithal, that have been deemed in need of help, can't sign contracts either. So one thing is, I think people are sort of waking up and saying, these contracts that we're all forming on the internet to share our data, to share our lives, to perhaps share our ideas and concepts and have them no longer owned by us, to all of the activities that we take advantage of are very data intense. So how is it that kids are signing the contracts?
Well, and let me pause you right there, because I want to go back to what you said in the very beginning. You got into this entire conversation around because of the question of who's going to pay for this. Mm-hmm. And we often commercially enter into it. Well, we pay for it by whoever signs the contract. And that paying in the internet age could very well be, I'm going to give you some money. But more importantly, we have a $4 trillion marketplace called the internet, where that we're not actually often exchanging money as much as we're exchanging data in exchange for our services. So we're actually paying for our data. And so what you're suggesting is, when kids sign up, those minors, people under 18, teens, there's a whole bunch of different labels we can give to these people. When they're coming online and they're signing up to that terms of service or that privacy policy or that internet contract in exchange for their data, what you're kind of suggesting is they can't actually legally do that.
That's right.
Okay.
But it's acceptable. I guess it's an acceptable level of expense. In some case, though, it's an acceptable fraud, because they know that children under the age of consent, so the world is deemed the age of digital consent, just like you look at what is the age of consent for alcohol or tobacco or pornography or marriage or, all sorts of activities, right? Driving a car. So society is deemed early on, maybe with COPPA as the first sort of stake in the ground, that 13 is the age of consent. And so what's happening in the world really is that people are saying, wow, these 13 to 17-year-olds are getting themselves in a little bit of trouble. And I think we handled the 12 and unders. They're not there, right? But they are there. They're a big portion of the teens getting themselves in trouble.
Well, let me pause there and let's bring Lucy into the conversation. So another stat that Shauna had shared with me from UNICEF is 90% of 2-year-olds are online, right? Because they're being given tablets and computers, and this whole idea of acceptable fraud. And Lucy, you had shared with me this quote. What is ethical is not always lawful, and what is lawful is not always ethical. So maybe we can jump off from there, and you can tell us, like, what's going on.
Oh, I wish I could cover everything that's wrong with the world right here, right now. But I think there's something there to what Denise just said. Children can't sign contracts, but they still have needs and they still have rights. And there's definitely something about, we can't just shut the door and say, you can't open this door, you can't come through till you're 18. It's not feasible. And from our discussion, very, very lively discussion we had the other day, some people will lie to get access to services and to information that they're barred from by virtue of their age. So if a 2-year-old has a tablet, the odds are very, very good that that is a tablet that is controlled by the parent who has set things up and who has provided that with access only to some extremely locked down, child-friendly options. You would
or not. They might have just said, "Here you go.
Here you go. Here's mummy's tablet. Be quiet while I order your chips." Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And every parent, I can't see anyone else's faces, but I'm sure all the parents in the room right now are going, that is how it is. Here, take my phone and just be quiet for 5 minutes, please. There are many issues that we have here. Children are smart. They will find a way to get what they want and do what they want. And many parents are not totally aware of what options are there for control and how they're supposed to navigate that and deal with that. If you're as old as I am, this wasn't around when I was a child. It just wasn't a thing. We got computers when I was in college. We got the internet when I was already an adult. So it's a very, very complicated scenario. Lots of children are online. Lots of children are accessing things it's not appropriate for them to access. But for me, this is where the ethics come in. Who's to say what's appropriate? If we're going to ban children from accessing, let's say, pornography, that's right, that's fair, that's proper, I agree. If we say that any content that mentions that, for example, somebody is gay or that they are transgender is labeled as pornography, is that correct? No, it's not, because nothing, just because you mention someone's sexuality doesn't mean that it's porn. But to some people, that is a control that they would like to exert. Yeah, that is something that they would like to classify. And this is where we start to get into the ethical questions. Is it right to ban children from learning about something that may be really very relevant to them and maybe supportive to them? Yeah. Okay. And then huge amounts of grey areas just open up. Sorry, Denise.
It's a balancing act, isn't it?
It's really totally a balancing act. And it's never going to be a one size fits all. My 13-year-old may be more or less mature than your 13-year-old, may be more or less aware of the dangers. And I have a very large family, many children, and they're not all like each other. They're not all the same. They weren't all the same when they hit the age of 13 or 14 or 18. So there are so many nuances to this question. It comes down to, how do we avoid actually accidentally causing harms as we start to put together the legislation, the controls that we most certainly do need? How do we make sure they're not accidentally disadvantaging or harming somebody in the process? That's the ethics angle.
Yeah, and in a previous session, Jimmy Jones in the privacy and security session was really talking a lot about the regulations and the laws and the security and those standards that are all helping us kind of do it right. But you're also providing this fact that there's also this ethics thing that we need to consider, where it's not necessarily rules and laws and technology. So I think that's really important. So
I'd love to just jump in on that for just a second, though. I want to, I want to sort of hang a flag for COPPA, which has now evolved to other laws and interpretations and the like. And that is that it does not say you cannot serve any particular content. It doesn't say you can't collect any particular kind of data. It says that you have to put what you're collecting against the risk that you're posing with that you have to have levels of assurance for just how verifiable your parental consent is. But what really does matter in all of it is everyone has, I think what I've learned from all of it is that age matters. So it's every 13-year-old, as Lucy said, is not the same. But if the rule is 13, where do we, the real quandary is, what do we do about all the 10, 11, 12-year-olds lying that they're 13 and over without forcing all of us to verify our identities in order to get access to the content Lucy's talking about? So it's a real balancing act right now. And I think that we do need to say to ourselves, as society, we live in a particular country or state, and their drinking age is 21, then, we have to consider, are we going to give our kids a driver's license to go get their alcohol at 16 because somehow it's different virtually?
Right, and again, we keep kind of defaulting to this children, minors, under 13, under 18, teens, 2-year-olds, but let's not forget these vulnerable adults. Because the elderly and those that are being challenged with fraud. Like even my daughter, who's in college right now, got caught up in a college hiring scam, which is a new thing. And now luckily she was smart enough to, and my wife was smart enough to like see it immediately and not get caught up or lose anything. But 1 or 2 days away, she could have it could have been pretty devastating. So.
And it's also access.
So how do you deal with these things?
Yeah, my father is, going to be 88. He's got diagnosed dementia. I keep him at home and try to keep the caretaker help coming in. But I am his digital footprint. And when something goes wrong, because I'm a female, even though I have a little bit of a raspy voice, I still have to like grab a guy, any old dude will do, put him on the phone, have him talk about my dad's name, date of birth, and his last 4 digits of social. And then, yes, can you please talk to my daughter, Denise, and then hand me the phone. Like that's still happening today. And we haven't resolved that side of just how do we actually recognize that there are other adults helping vulnerable adults, and how can we help those adults not be the impersonation of their loved one, but rather the help, the associated helper. So when I log into the bank and to his electric bill, they don't know it's me.
Yeah.
So then what happens to all of the data from all of that? So the downstream impact of what it means to manage somebody else's life online.
So that tells us the what, right? So why does this matter? So, and let's look at it through the lens of a business, not just through the, or actually let's look at it through multiple lenses. So let's talk about the why does it matter? You have, we're most of the audience here are industry, so they're looking to make money and to deliver services, and to comply with laws and regulations. So you've got the business lens, but then you have other constituents as well, such as you have the parent, and then you actually have the individual themselves, whether or not it be a child or vulnerable adult. So Lucy, why are we talking about this? I mean, why does this matter? We talked about the what's, but why does this matter?
Why does this matter? Well, it matters because people get hurt. Bad things happen. Children get scammed. Elderly relatives get scammed. Even smart, bright, well-informed young adults can be taken for a ride. We've mentioned risk as a specific concept for the first thing. I actually have a flashcard prepared for this one because this is my favorite hobby horse after data. Defining risk correctly is the number one thing that businesses get wrong.
Okay, let me pause you right there. Maybe Sam, can you turn on the slides? And then I want to show that. Maybe you can talk about this continuum. So we've got this sliding scale of risk. So please go ahead and share that with us.
Yeah, so this is Denise's slide, in fact, and it's an excellent slide. So think about a risk-based approach. When we start to define risk, like 99% of the time, people start defining risk, and what they're actually defining is consequences. There is a risk that I will get fined by my country's regulator. There is a risk that somebody's data will be shared inappropriately. And actually, when you're defining a risk, you've got to be looking at what caused that to happen. What is the effect if it does happen? What is the impact? Okay. And then how am I going to either prevent, mitigate, or tolerate that risk? What am I doing about it? So the why does it matter is because we don't think about risk in the right way. And if you don't have a risk management professional or an emergency planning professional to call on, it's very easy to fall into that trap. So I've seen some really, the politest way I can put it is lacking risk registers in my time. And working on supporting people to actually say, like, stop, sit down, think about what might go wrong, who might get hurt. Yep. So if we had an age verifying control in place that prevents people from accessing something until they turn 18, so the example that I used earlier, you can't access porn until you turn 18. Oh, well, too bad, because Tumblr has just flagged every post that is about supporting transgender youth as porn because it mentions the word transgender. Sucks to be you. Now you can't look at, you can't talk to your mutuals, you can't find the helpline number that you need if you're feeling suicidal. Somebody could get hurt. Somebody will get hurt if that happens. So if we're going to define risk, we have to say who might get hurt. We do it this way. What if somebody really needs that thing or whatever it is? What if something happens that's outside of control? How do we mitigate that risk? How do we support? So always, why does it matter? Because someone's going to get hurt. And if it was your action or your business's action or your business's policy that made it so, and it can be shown that you did not consider that fully, you're liable.
Okay.
I mean, you should feel bad,
on
but
this,
you're liable.
why do we hurt example too? At the other time, it's not, let's think about like and since you brought up the porn related conversation, as the internet's becoming age aware, Denise, this is one of the things you taught me too. It's no longer enough to let someone self-attest their age. And in fact, the new regulations are essentially saying you are responsible business for knowing the age of the person coming to your site. And then based on that, you need to act accordingly. And so one could say, well, I'm going to take government documents and make you force me to tell you your age, but that is First Amendment rights. And so Pornhub just recently went through that in Texas, Denise, did they not? I mean, what's going on with that? And how do we balance these rights and understanding these ideas?
Well, to address the Texas question, yes, and they won. They won in Texas, so we've got
and explain it for those people that may have no idea what we're talking about.
At the end of the day, you will not have to verify your identity to access porn in Texas, as you don't have to.
Your identity or your age. Let's be clear.
Your age. Let's be very clear. You're right. That you are of age for that particular service. It's interesting, right? Like in my world of verifiable parental consent, of age, what is of age? You could have a child, a 2-year-old, when you're, 14. So what is of age in our space? But yes, and in Arkansas, they had a social media bill. It was due to come into force on September 1, and an injunction was provided or given to the group that was fighting the state on that. And in that particular case, they said, look, state, you went too narrow. You said this is only social media. All new social media accounts would require age verification and verifiable parental consent for 17 and under. So a parent guardian would have to consent. So those are two camps. It's one thing to verify age. It's another thing to have an individual verify age and become a entity that has the rights over another. And that parental consent is a living, breathing thing. It's not a one and done. Hi, I'm 25. Now let me in. It's an ongoing thing. So this is a nice one.
For a business, this is really hard because this is a slide you prepared for us.
Yeah. On the internet, it's really hard to know who's a kid. And but we still have to make some effort. And the question is, what verticals, what content, what products and services would they do that with? It's kind of interesting that we're regulating social media before we regulate porn, or I don't know, some other sort
or
of
commerce
your
or
cannabis
advertising
shop, or you're right, or particular kinds of commerce. Like, I mean, look, we can all agree an 8-year-old shouldn't have an account on Grindr, right?
Mhm.
That okay, and even a child who's not certain on their gender may actually be at more risk to be in certain environments because there's a narrower group that they feel they can be, that they can identify with. So age does matter. But for businesses, I think this is the deal. It's whack-a-mole right now. It started with COPPA. It went to GDPR. The Children's Code in the UK is now spreading to a safety bill. And in the US, we've got the Kids Online Safety Act, which is COSA. That's at the federal level. We've got COPPA 2.0, which is, hey, the 13 to 15-year-olds need some protection. And then we have states like California with the age-appropriate design code, and Texas, and it just passed a parental consent social media, like, except it's all media, any interactive media. They want to know that before a child has an account, it doesn't say before they see or look at any particular data. It just says before somebody signs up for that account. So this is a map that just sort of, gives you an idea of what's going on. And then at the same time, India just came out with they're 17 and under needing parental consent. So I guess what I'm saying is we can run, but we can't hide. Eventually, they're going to try. The regulators are going to feel enough pressure, and parents are going to feel enough discomfort, and then the children who don't have active parents, we're going to have a lot of situations ethically that we have to deal with. Parents who aren't legal, perhaps, and don't want to go through any sort of process to register online or to claim that parental right online. So we need, in my opinion, amendments, changes, understanding that you can allow, as a service provider, I can allow a co-parent, another adult, as long as that adult can verify and tell me that they have an agreement with the real adult that is responsible, so that it's an agency sort of situation. And I need to eliminate impersonation. Adults can't impersonate children, but they can. There's no law that says they can't. There's all sorts of other little things around all of this. I'll
yeah, and again, and we're going to get to the IoT conversation in just a minute as we kind of get to the last part of our discussion. But I wanted to share one more kind of slide that Lucy shared with us. So let's get Sam to share our slides for us. And so Lucy, I really enjoy this one. So when businesses are approaching data, they're saying we're gonna take all this data, process it, and then get fabulous insights out of this. But one of the points that you pointed out is there are no unicorns with this process,
it's just
right?
us.
So
there are no unicorns.
What does this mean? And tell us, like, let's make this distinction. So Denise has been talking about the rules and the laws and the ethics and the standards and the technology, but you're coming up to more like first principles and ethics. And how do we balance these things?
Yeah. So yeah, I actually, that first slide, I actually drew that one because I needed an illustration in a hurry for a presentation. And that slide's probably about 10 years old now. That's how long I've been trying to have this conversation with people. There is a belief that if the technology is sufficiently sophisticated, that you can simply throw in all of your lumpy, grumpy, horrible grey spreadsheets into one end, crank a handle, and rainbows and fabulousness will come out the other end, and the technology will solve all the issues. And this is why I say there aren't any unicorns. If you open that box, it's people all the way down. It's people deciding what matters, why it matters, who it matters for, why it's important enough to be resolved, what data should be put in there, and what a resolution or a solution looks like. Every data problem is a people problem. So if we're trying to resolve this, throwing shiny technology at it is not the answer, because no matter how sophisticated that technology stack is, you still must have a human somewhere in there saying, does this look right? Have we thought of everything? Have we missed anything? Should I speak to anyone else before I go ahead with this? Does this make sense? You have to have that human input. And Denise talking so eloquently about how complicated this could be and how complicated it is even in the States, which as a British person, I see these states as a homogenous country, but I know it's really, you've got all those state differences from state to state, from county to county. So much to think about. This is complicated. Data is a factor. The technology will not save you if you haven't considered the complexities. There are no unicorns. There's just you sitting in the middle saying, I want to just build stuff. Can I just build stuff, please, and be done?
And here's a conversation for both, question for both of you, because Nasi has put together for us this mobile and IoT event. An IoT, Internet of Things, are internet-enabled connected devices, and really, at the end of the day, all of this is related to IoT, because as even Noah was talking about in the privacy security conversation, my son gets into the car. He's a teen. Well, he's driving he's basically on an IoT computer on wheels, right? There was a statistic I read the other day that said by 2025, we will be interacting with an IoT device 4,800 times a day. Every 13 to 18 seconds, our identity, our location, potentially our age, our data will flow through these IoT systems. And that's a challenge. So can you talk to us about this? Like, what does this mean in the age? Where do the devices come into this conversation?
Where do the devices come in? Well, everywhere and all over the place. And so sometimes people say, you can talk to me about what it's like, we're going to have an IoT talk. We're going to have an IoT event. And to me, it's like saying we're going to have a chair talk. Chairs exist and we use them for stuff. Yeah. So if we're talking about IoT, what we're talking about is people using an object or a service or an interface to get a job done. So in terms of what it means, well, that very much depends on how much of your information have you already put out there to be used? How are you using these services, and are you aware? And the majority of people are not aware. This comes back to my point about where vulnerable adults or minors are concerned. It's the parent or the conservator or the advocate or the deputy, the person who's supporting and helping that person, needs to be aware of what they're signing up to. Okay, so from a business perspective, clarity of instructions, clarity of what you're signing up to do and what your options are is pretty crucial.
So, but we have the child using the device or the vulnerable adult. We have the business is trying to interact with that child or adult, and the parents saying, "Oh, but I've turned off, I've appropriately set the settings of the device," or etc. And what we're finding is that's just kind of a panacea. That's really not enough. And a corollary that I'm seeing is in the web in the US, there's an initiative been called Global Privacy Control, where you could actually set a signal in your browser that says, "Hey, internet world, I'm telling you through this signal in my browser that I don't want you taking my data and monetizing it." And in fact, the California Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the Attorney General in California, has come up and said, "Hey, brands, like anything else of a consent or permission-based signal in the market, if you ignore that GPC signal, you are basically in violation of the CCPA." So we're getting these new signals that we're able to create into the market to both help individuals express and attest their desires and preferences, and so that brands can actually hear them. And Denise, this is where PRIVO comes in, right? Yep. So what has PRIVO done from an IoT device perspective that helps us, both legally address these things like you've raised, as well as ethically address them in the way Lucy's been talking about?
Well, one of the things that we do over at PRIVO is sort of help manage for our clients whether they're going to let kids in or keep them out. So if that's consent or identity verification or other services, but to keep them out is really starts with the age gate. And people want to throw the age gate, the baby out with the bathwater, but we just need smarter, more intelligent age gates that can listen. and not be sort of just dumb gates. And in doing so, we're delivering an age-appropriate device registry, we'll call it. But it's basically allowing parents to tell us the true age of the user of this device. And in doing so, we can then signal to those age gates that will listen that there's a minor child knocking at the digital door. Somebody
and this is really important. Let me pause you right there. So there are other age gates. I mean, anybody doing research in the market should look up that term age gate. And I was just talking with a team over at BT a little while ago, and they were talking about how the carriers, for example, in the mobile IoT world, are opening up the ability to signal age through the carrier network. However, the challenge with that is right now they can only legally signal that the owner on the contract at the carrier level is over the age of X, aka 21, which naturally will always be an adult, because only an adult can sign the carrier contract to sign up for a phone. So what happens is parent goes in, buys the phone, the network sees that them as over 21. They turn around then now and hand that device to a kid. Right. And so that, so relying on the carrier element at that point may not be enough. So you're suggesting there's another.
It's a launch pad. It's definitely a place where they could say, because they have parental controls, so they need their parental controls to signal in a way that's more framework oriented, where all of us can get involved, right? Because we all have signals that together can lead to a better outcome. So I think that, you're a parent, you're adding devices. Are these devices for a vulnerable member of your family? Oh, they are. Would their true age associated to their device help protect them from age restricted products and services, or at least then provide a next level for choice? If you need to be involved, you can then sign up your online contact data, and the company can actually deliver the notice and obtain the consent they're supposed to get. So the carriers could be huge in all of this.
And as can brands as well. So brands that, for instance, have partnered with your signal as well as signals from other providers, they could be instructing the brands too. I'm Disney, I'm XY, I'm Mattel, I cater to children, I cater to vulnerable adults. By the way, here are these services where you can register your devices, to which we support.
Yes.
And
right now, if you
think everybody to participate in the ecosystem.
Those same companies that you just mentioned today, any of those companies that might have mobile apps or services that have identifiers that need to be used, just to keep the systems working, for operations, let's call it. They have to go in and flag themselves as child-directed services, right? So they have to say, hey, we're a child-directed service. You third-party advertiser network, you must now know that the data we just shared with you to get our job done, you can't sell it. You can't onward move it.
Right. So for those listening to this, there is technology in place, like the age gating service and device registry services are providing from PRIVO, and the ecosystem to which PRIVO works in. So I highly encourage you to reach out to Denise if you want to know anything about this space. But there's also another one. And if we can go ahead and share the slide again, Sam, I would like to have Denise kind of help us too. Here's another, and again, maybe we can look at Denise while she's watching, walking this through. Denise, talk to us about this ODI ethics canvas too. Beyond the technology, how do we apply this when we're trying to solve these data issues?
Lucy, I'm going to hand this to you. This is you.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Lucy. Yeah.
This one is mine. Yeah. So I'm an associate with the Open Data Institute. I deliver training. One of the sessions that I deliver is about an introduction to data ethics. Now, the canvas that you're looking at right now, this is a free open tool. So if any of you right now are thinking, well, I need to do something about this right now, but I don't have the money to get an expert in just at the moment, you can go and download this and just work your way through it yourself. It is somewhere between a privacy impact assessment and a consequence scanning exercise. And it basically just encourages you to ask yourself the questions that you can see, and you probably can't read the tiny text, but you can see each bubble has a heading. So what do you know about your data? What do you know about the limitations in the data you're collecting? What do you know about the legal and the ethical context? Describing your purpose very, very clearly, describing what good you're trying to get done, what your task is, but also really delving into the potential negative impacts and minimizing those. Some stuff around engagement, communication, openness, transparency, how you communicate what you're trying to get done, how you get that message to all the people who need it. And then right hand side there, the blue bubbles are about your processes, how you're going to implement this. Is there anything you couldn't answer? So it's an action to go take away. And I wanted to circle that back because a couple of things that Denise said just now, I absolutely loved the way that you were describing how a parent might approach that interface, or a business might approach informing a parent, that you might look at something and say, here is something that you can do. You have this option to control this thing in this way. Is that something that would help you? This is absolutely the voice that we need to be bringing to parents in this situation. So as a business, are you helping a parent? Are you having a conversation with them rather than saying, is your child 18? Yes or no? Quick answer. It's more, is your child, is it appropriate for your child to access content that might contain this? Are you comfortable allowing this particular type of content through for this purpose? And have that as it's a dialogue.
Well, and on that point you said too, because my daughter often tells me I have a maturity of a 3-year-old, right? So there are some people that are, some kids are more mature than others. Some adults are more mature than others. Or, maturity is just one scale, right? So you need to have that guardian, if you will, help participate in the guidance of this. And I think that's the responsibility of the brands and the players to help with that.
Yeah, for sure. And one other point that I wish I'd known that the point about standards and frameworks was going to come up, because it should be known that there's an XKCD comic for every occasion, but there is indeed a comic about universal standards and a quote. The nice thing about universal standards is there are so many of them. So if we're going to introduce something like the global parental control or whatever, sorry, GPC, and I forgot exactly what it stood for, that's great. If everybody adopts it, that's better still. But there are always going to be varying different frameworks and standards. If we're going to have them, and sometimes they are kind of necessary, how do we stitch them together? How do we resolve the issues that are going to occur at the boundaries? And we can only do that, firstly, by making sure that the people setting those controls on behalf of their vulnerable child or adult fully understand what they're saying yes and no to, and by really teasing out, what could go wrong? What if a bad actor gets into this chain? How are we going to deal with that?
And that's one of the other recommendations you have, is you call it the consequence analysis.
Yes, the consequence toolkit.
Think about all the issues, think about the consequences. And from an ethicist perspective, you're saying with the lens of what might cause harm.
Yeah.
Right. And then go from there. So we've got about 2 minutes left. Let's share the slides once more to get some parting resources. And then, from each of you, what are the key takeaways, and what actions do those that are listening to this right now, what should they start taking this afternoon and tomorrow? Where do they go from here? Let's start with you, Denise.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So I said my quick 3 are: know your audience. Don't make privacy and safety for that audience an afterthought, because growing at all costs can have detrimental impact to vulnerable people. Second, get a subject matter expert, a professional on your team. Use the frameworks and tools that are available to help build the controls.
But Denise, what if someone says, I can't afford a subject matter expert? I'm a startup.
Well, I would say that if you're going to open a bank in today's day and time, you have to be prepared to do what you need to do to meet all the regulation that comes along with running a bank. And so I would say that you cannot have that attitude. Now, that doesn't mean you have to spend tens of thousands of dollars, but you're going to need to spend something, both time and resource, in order to get yourself the right help. Do it up front, and you'll save a whole lot of money downstream. I don't think the idea, even for the well-funded startups, grow at any cost, are going to be able to pay the $500 million fines that we've now seen come. So I think it's important to allocate for this.
And Lucy, 30 seconds. You get the last word. What's
yeah.
take?
To echo Denise, if you can't afford to spend a few thousand or a few tens of thousands of dollars right now on expertise, you certainly won't be able to afford the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in fines and liability. Every data project is a people project. I've already said that one time. So don't think this doesn't mean you. Okay, if you're creating a service, then you're serving people. People can be harmed. If you're using data, you can harm them using data. Think about what it is, and remember there are free tools, free and open tools that you can use. And yes, get some expertise if you possibly can.
Okay. Thank you very much. This was really enjoyable, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.